you do roll call?
Yes, Commissioner Donaldson,
Here.
Commissioner Geeson-Fields,
Present.
Commissioner Jennings,
Here.
Commissioner Waddy,
Here.
Chair Kent.
Here. Ex parte communications, we don't have much on the agenda, but any, has there been any ex parte communications?
Nope.
For consent calendar. So, Ann, is it right that you're pulling?
Yeah, we're going to pull 1060 Evelyn and give you a proper staff report and presentation.
Okay.
You're going to pull it and get, I'm not quite clear.
We're just going to take it off the consent calendar, or consent calendar, and give you a presentation on the
So you're
project.
going to put it on the
Yeah.
regular agenda? Okay, thank you. So could you introduce that project?
Did you want to take action on the meeting minutes?
That's right, you throw me off now, all right. So yep, what we now have is on the consent calendar is minutes from our last meeting. Anyone have any comments on that, or?
I had just one thing to clarify. On page 5 of the minutes, so it refers to Commissioner Jennings talking at line 31, and then again at line 37. But I think that line 37 was actually Commissioner Waddy, because I don't think I would have said anything about fiberglass windows, but that sounds like her. So if you could correct that. Thank you.
Okay, with that said, would anyone like to?
I'll make a motion. I'll make a motion to approve the September 12th, 2018 Planning and Zoning Commission meeting minutes with the corrections that Commissioner Jennings noted.
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 All in favor, the consent calendar passes. So moving item PA 18054, design review for conditional use permit for the two-level addition at 1060 Evelyn Avenue from the consent calendar to the agenda, correct?
That's correct.
So Ann, could you introduce that, or Chris?
I'll turn it over to Chris.
Good evening, everyone. Once again, this is planning application 18054, design review for a second-story addition at 1060 Evelyn. Some background on the property. The subject site is a 3,800 square foot lot with a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom, 947 square foot home built in 1926. The property has a detached garage that is proposed to remain. There's also an existing detached shed at the rear that is proposed to be removed. City records show the following work done to the property: tower replacement, window replacement, termite repair, and voluntary structural strengthening. Here's a street view of the property as it sits today. Project request. The applicant is seeking design review for a first and second story addition at the rear of the property. They're also seeking a conditional use permit to vertically extend the existing non-conforming north wall. Here's an existing elevation of the property. And here's what's proposed. Exceptional design. Projects which exceed a 0.45 FAR are subject to exceptional design as reviewed by the Planning and Zoning Commission. Exceptional design treatments include contrasting exterior materials such as stucco and wood siding, wood-clad windows and doors, wooden decks, and increased livability with the proposed home expansion. Parking. There are two existing off-street parking spaces located in the side yard that are proposed to remain. No additional parking spaces are triggered with the proposed additions to the home. Conditional use permit. The subject property is located in the R1 zoning district, which requires a side yard setback of 10% of lot width. The subject lot is 38 feet wide, thus requiring a side yard setback of 3.8 feet or 3 feet 9 5/8 inches. The project proposal shows a horizontal extension of existing non-conforming north wall, which is 3 foot 7 3/16 of an inch from the property line. This means the existing north wall is 2 7/16 of an inch out of compliance. The applicant is seeking a conditional use permit to vertically extend the existing north wall. And here's just a code excerpt from section 2024-020, table 2A19, subsection A, that basically identifies that code provision. Staff has not received any correspondences in regard to the project proposal. The project is categorically exempt from CEQA. And recommendation, the staff recommends that the Planning and Zoning Commission review and approve the proposed project subject to the findings and conditions of approval. Staff identified that there is a horizontal wall that is proposed to be extended. Staff has included a condition in your staff memo requiring modification as part of the building permit set. And just one other note, the property owner came in today and has concerns that he would like to address the commission on. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions of staff?
Not right now, not right now. Maybe a little later.
Bring up the property owner. Hear from them. The representative.
Hello, I'm Stacy Eisman. I'm the architect. I'm also an Albany resident. So we're willing to accept the conditions of approval. However, we wanted to just ask if you would be willing to consider an extension of an existing non-conforming wall in a horizontal direction because we're 2 inches off. And I wanted to show you the images of what would happen if we went 2 inches off. And I'm wondering if do you have the projector? Or maybe I could pass this around.
I would pass it around.
Okay.
Yeah, that thing takes forever to set up.
That's okay. So what I'd like to do is just pass around 2 images, and you'll see that it's a more modern design. We are showing it's a Japanese wood exterior facade in certain locations, and then a kind of clean white stucco and bronze windows. And one is showing the design as we would like, and the other is showing the two and some change recess. And this is important to the homeowner, so I would like to at least ask that we consider it. Oh, additionally, I have a letter from the adjacent homeowner and a couple other neighbors that are also in support of extending the existing non-conforming wall horizontally. And we recognize that that's not something that has historically been done in Albany, but we think that there is language for it in the code if we look for it. I'll tell you what, I'll sit down unless there are questions for me, and then if you, Eddie might also like to say a word or two.
Could I ask a question before you sit down?
Yes.
So could you just explain the language in the code that you think does support extending it horizontally? That's you?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, that's for me.
Okay, I'm going to let Eddie dive in. Do you want me to stick around?
Yeah, it's fine. Homeowner at 1060. So I will read this. I know we can all read it as well, but I think it's helpful to kind of hear it as well. So the code that was called out was 20.24.020, 19A. And so this talks about the non-conforming walls shall be allowed to extend up over an existing wall or foundation, which does not conform to the required setback, subject to design review by the Planning and Zoning Commission and obtaining a use permit. This is the next sentence that I'm focusing on. Existing walls, so the definition of what an existing wall is seems clear. That's a pre-existing site, which do not conform to the existing side or rear yard setbacks, and we are concerned about the side setback of 10%, may be extended, and in this case, the definition of extended is not constrained in any way by wording here in the vertical or horizontal plane. An extension of an existing wall shall most likely include new construction, right? So how do you extend an existing wall? You probably have to add on to it. Subject to design review by the Planning and Zoning Commission and a use permit. So that's the sentence where I think there isn't a prescription in the code which states there is no allowance for vertical or horizontal exceptions. What it does allow for a discretionary determination by the zoning commission to extend that. And the nature of that extension is detailed in the last sentence. Such extensions shall not further encroach on any required setback. So the example given here, if the nonconforming wall is 1 foot into a required setback, you shall not be permitted to encroach 2 feet or create a new encroachment. And so we are continuing the existing wall, which is at 3 feet and 7 and I forget how many fractions of an inch, 7/16, back 12 feet. And we think that from a design language, that presents a much more cohesive design for the building, which is, I think, beneficial to Albany as a community. Requiring that change obviously could be dealt with from a design perspective, but it's such a nominal one. We think that the code provides language that could support the Planning Commission's decision to allow that to proceed. And I will take questions on that explanation.
Questions?
I don't really have a question about the explanation. I guess I'm just curious, in the images you sent us of the sort of with
The dent,
Pass
kind
them
of.
back up.
Yeah.
Pass them back there, yeah.
I guess in the version that you wouldn't want, is this wall, that's the existing location?
Yes, so the to the left on the image is the pre-existing wall that we are planning on extending in the horizontal direction to the west.
So this new wall, basically, you located so that it wouldn't encroach?
Right.
That's right.
Okay.
So the wall on the left, we've already paid the fee to extend it vertically, the existing non-conforming vertically. And the new addition is set in the 2 inches.
Okay.
And I guess the argument here is that really benefits Albany by setting that wall in 2 inches? And what would the neighbor prefer to look at? And they're saying they would much rather see a clean wall.
And this little sort of reveal at the roof line is just so that you can keep the same roof line consistent?
We're not obligated to set the eave in, which is
Okay.
the,
So that's supposed to be the eave?
That's the eave.
building. Okay.
Just to put this in context for the commission, I've pulled up the floor plans, so you can see that this is the wall in question that would have to, if you concluded that it needed to have a conforming side yard setback, this would be moved in a couple inches.
I can't see, is the cursor up there,
Yeah, it's right there.
It's there.
or? Oh, okay.
So this is the existing wall that's non-conforming.
And
We're
that-
proposing the extension of that existing wall without new encroachment, 12 feet back.
You're proposing a horizontal extension and a vertical extension.
That's correct.
And just for additional context, it's the wall will extend 12 and a half feet.
Okay, 12 and a half.
Back,
Yes.
right.
I had one other question for staff. Is that action also a conditional use in the same way it is for the vertical extension, or is it a different method of approval?
It would be a conditional use permit.
Okay, so
but-
both the horizontal and vertical.
But I will say, this would be precedent setting. The last time this commission approved a horizontal extension of a non-conforming wall, it was through a variance, and it was on a lot that measured 65 feet in width by 45 feet in depth. So a very rectangular parcel where the house was much more horizontal to the lot.
And on other projects, I think I think at least one of the McGregor revisions, they had a horizontal extension of the rear, and we made them pull it back to the full setback. And in that case, it was like a foot difference. I mean, this is just inches, but I think, I read that sentence that says, such extensions shall not further encroach into any required setback. I think that doesn't give us much flexibility, because this would be like creating a new foundation. You're going to have a new foundation there, and you're going to put the new foundation where it's not allowed.
Sure, I would just further,
Yeah.
I would read the rest of that sentence to explain in what manner that further encroachment is being defined. And that states a non-conforming wall which encroaches 1 foot into a required setback shall not be permitted to encroach 2 feet. So increasing the encroachment,
Right.
that's not occurring in this instance.
That's the
It is
example, yeah.
maintaining it exactly the same.
Yeah.
And in that way, I think it is again, it's how one interprets a sentence, but that interpretation, to me, believes that there is ability for the commission to show this as an allowance, so.
So I mean, I'm inclined to agree with the applicant's reading of this for a couple of reasons. First, and I also appreciate why staff reads it the way you do, but I think you have to read the first 2 sentences together. It's written in a little bit of a confusing way, but you could essentially read the first 2 sentences to either mean the exact same thing, which I think is how staff is reading it, or you could read them to mean different things. And if they are read to mean the exact same thing, there's like a canon of like statutory interpretation that has some Latin name that I can't think of, but I think it's disfavored to read language as being redundant or superfluous. And if you read that second sentence to mean the same thing as the first sentence, there's no reason for that second sentence to exist, which means I think the more reasonable reading is that it has its own meaning separate from what the first sentence says. And the first sentence very clearly refers to extending up, so it does have that directional language in it, and the second sentence doesn't, which I think actually creates an independent basis to read it as meaning that you can extend in a direction other than up. I would also just offer that I do think that the way the parenthetical at the end is worded, it doesn't just say e.g., a non-conforming wall which encroaches 1 foot shall not be permitted to encroach 2 feet. It says i.e., which, and I don't remember what the Latin actually means, but it's supposed to be that means.
Right.
So that's not really given as an example, that is given as the meaning. And, so this doesn't increase the degree of the encroachment into that side yard, and it also doesn't create a new encroachment in another direction.
That's right.
So I would read this all as meaning that we do have discretion to issue a use permit that would allow that extension. And I know that staff didn't, this wasn't part of the original proposal, and so there isn't a whole analysis about it, but I think based on the information that we have, both from a design perspective and, the views of the neighbors, I think are relevant, if not determinative. And the fact that this is such a tiny encroachment, I would be inclined to support a use permit for the horizontal extension as well as the vertical.
I really regret that it is such a tiny encroachment, because I would like to say, sure, go ahead. But I don't think I can. I'd have to vote no.
So how do you?
I hear what you're saying.
I'm curious how you read those 2 sentences
Yeah,
together.
I read the sentences, and I read them to say that we shouldn't be allowing a yard encroachment to expand except vertically over an existing foundation.
So what does the second sentence mean then? Does it mean the same thing as the first sentence?
Why is the second sentence there?
Yeah. Do you
Yeah.
think it's just like
Yeah.
bad drafting, or it actually means something different?
I would also point out,
Yeah, I think it's there because it's intended to keep people from trying to say, well, we already have an encroachment, so we want another foot. We want encroach another foot or another inch or another 5 inches or whatever it is. I think that's what it's intended to be there. And I think historically, we've interpreted it to not allow this very situation where a home is going both up and back. And I think historically, we've interpreted it as meaning, yes, the vertical extension on an existing foundation, you can get a use permit for that. But we haven't been giving use permits, and we've required other applicants to design their buildings so that the extension to the rear meets the setback, it's the side yard setback requirement. And I can think of a couple of examples where that's happened, and staff has had applicants design projects so that they have a jog in the back of the building in order to meet the conform with the side yard.
So go ahead.
And I think that this would be an extension into the side yard, a rear extension into the side yard. It would be continuing it.
So I would also call out that there is no language which disallows extension in a direction other than up. It just states that it shall be allowed to extend up.
Right.
It doesn't explicitly say that it cannot be allowed to extend out. And so there is actually no specific language which says the horizontal axis is not called out. And
Right.
furthermore, in section B, which is not shown on the slide, that calls out very specific horizontal and vertical axes of extension. And so it shows that the language of the drafters were specific in what direction that extension could or could not extend, whereas in A, they are very open and have not precluded the horizontal extension by language. So by reading the two codes together, there's a conflict in the interpretation through the specificity of B over A. And so if you can't reconcile those two things, it's kind of hard to make a claim. I understand past decisions. I like to think that we can learn and change and make new decisions. This may be that case to allow that to happen. And I know that you guys are drafting new design guidelines. I'm a new member of Albany's community. We've hired a great architect trying to add to the neighborhood in substantial financial commitments to design and build something beautiful that I think will aid in all of our experience. And so I think by the collective language defined in 19, and I don't know if someone could bring up that, if you wanted to see the specificity, I could read it as an example. This is about conforming front yard setbacks. Such walls may be extended in an existing vertical or horizontal plane subject to design review. And so it calls out very specifically the axis of extension, whereas in A, they say it may extend up, but they don't say it cannot extend horizontally. The language of those two together provides enough, I think, leeway for the commission to kind of make a decision without indicting past decisions.
If I can just.
Are we
chime
jumping
in.
into,
Yeah,
are we jumping into discussion, or are we going to do the public hearing?
Well,
I thought we were just doing
Oh,
questions.
that's right, I'm sorry.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So any questions of,
I did have one other quick question. What is the dimension of the side yard on the opposite side of the building? So you've got 2 and
It's a-
change on.
You mean on the south side?
Yes.
It's about 10 feet if the plan came up.
Yeah, we should
Yeah.
grab the drawing.
And then I guess my other question would be, it appears, but I don't have this information, that the 3 buildings, you guys are smack in the middle of 3 sort of triplet buildings that likely were all built together, and they seem to have that same pattern of a larger setback on the south side, smaller on the north, larger on the south, and they kind of play off of each other in that way.
That's right.
Yeah.
So the survey says that we're 10.1 feet on the other side.
On the south.
So yes,
Yeah.
That was my question.
and I'm happy to pass this.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to open it up for public comment. Is there anyone from the public who wants to comment on this project? See anyone? So no cards. So let's move it back to the commission. Let's start on that.
Well, I mean, I'll kind of jump into where we left off. I appreciate Commissioner Jennings' sort of interpretation of the code language. Unfortunately, I think past experience on this commission has shown me that there's a lot of code language that's unintentionally redundant and unintended, as seen by the codes that we've had to revise the language of to make clear in terms of its intent. But that being said, I mean, another means of interpretation of regulations is from precedent and past experience. And I know I've sat on many design reviews where we've forced applicants to jog the walls where they have new foundations, and that the existing non-conforming extensions were only allowed for the existing foundations. And just sort of pragmatically, my sort of thought about that is that this is new construction, and so they have the opportunity to make it conforming rather than making it non-conforming simply to add 2 inches to their master bedroom. And so the added 2 inches or whatever it may be, 4 or 5 inches, doesn't seem like it's going to be gaining the actual usage or adding to the usage of the property. I think aesthetically it would look a lot better, but I'm having a hard time seeing a hard reason. Like it's not creating a closet or a bedroom that's 4 feet wide. It's going to end up being 10 foot 4 instead of 10 foot, whatever it is. And so I don't find that as compelling of an argument. And again, I mean, I think if we were to approve this, it's going to open up basically every project where we have an addition that comes before us. I would say not the majority, but close to have non-conforming walls that are extended. And if we allow this, it's going to be opening up, I'm afraid, a can of worms in terms of other projects that instead of whatever this project's asking for, 4 inches or something, they're going to want a foot or 2 feet. And where do we draw the line? And how do we draw that line? So I don't know. Right now I'm leaning towards agreeing with Commissioner Donaldson in terms of not approving that horizontal extension. I do think the applicant has made a strong argument for the interpretation of this. And I do agree that it is redundant, the second sentence. But I'm not quite sure yet. So those are kind of my off-the-cuff thoughts about it.
Sure. Well, I definitely do think that we are allowed to make the decision here. I think to me, the language, I feel confident that this is within our purview to make the judgment call. For me, I'm less concerned about the precedent-setting nature. To me, when things are subject to a conditional use, it inherently means they're reviewed on a case-by-case basis. So to me, what that means is I'm going to be looking at what does this block look like? What do the next-door neighbors look like? What does the proposed project look like? And based on all of those factors is what's being requested necessary, desirable, compatible with creating adverse impacts, and not impinging on the health, safety, and welfare of the general public. So the precedent-setting aspect for me is less of an issue. I would feel very confident disapproving one if it wasn't appropriate in a certain circumstance. For me, I'm more inclined to support this, and one of the primary reasons is probably what I was alluding to with the built pattern of these 3 buildings that were built at the same time. They were clearly built with a pattern, and to me, the larger setback on one side, which is the access for parking on that lot to the detached garages in the back, pairs with the smaller setback on the neighboring building, and those 2 spaces work with one another. And I think there's something about sort of the character in Albany when you have these little clusters and groupings of buildings that were historically built together to respect that and to allow for that character to be contained and adapted and evolved and improved on so that those buildings can last, another 100 years and be occupied. The 2 inches is almost more bothersome to me than if it were a larger amount for weatherproofing issues. That's going to be a bear to weatherproof. You're going to have water intrusion issues very likely by having only a 2-inch reveal. And I don't understand what anyone gains by us doing that other than just saying we were consistent. I don't think it actually pragmatically does anything to the built environment, any kind of value add to the built environment to make them do that 2-inch reveal. And I think there's more to lose by it. So that's sort of my comment on the conditional use related aspects of this, because I am also a little bit of a stickler of the way these buildings built and read together. The only other comment that I have, which I know is not subject to sort of this larger discussion, is just the window changes on the front facade. I would personally be very supportive of the project at this point, with the condition of retaining the picture window at the front rather than changing that into a double casement on the front facade. I do think there's sort of a characteristic on those 3 buildings of retaining the larger picture window. So if the sponsor is amenable to that, that would be my only solution. So those are the only, one other clarifying, the plans did mention a clad window system. Is that aluminum clad windows? Okay, great. So that would be sort of my thoughts on the project.
Can I ask you sort of a response to that and hypothetical? So I guess I'm curious what your position would be if this specific project, this applicant was asking for a horizontal extension that was, let's say like about 1 foot, that would be equal to the extension into the setback that the fireplace makes for that reveal area. Like, how would you find that?
On the side that they're proposed, on the deficient side?
Yeah.
If they were going out a foot farther?
Yeah.
So to me, it's about carrying that wall. So I would be less supportive of sort of that further encroachment, but the fact that they're retaining sort of that built pattern and that spacing pattern is why I don't have an issue with that.
Okay, so the sort of pre-existing historical character of the project would be more of a guiding principle for you.
Exactly.
Okay. Because,
Go
sorry,
ahead.
I was going to say, just because I mean, I feel like that condition could be, how can I put it? Well, I guess there's no way to really beautifully put it. I mean, but I could see I don't know. I'm just going to leave it.
And I think I was just going back on, because I do think it's the type of thing that intellectually can be argued in sort of all of these hypotheticals. And what I personally just boil it back to is, it's this project in front of us today. Is there a problem with this proposal today in this context to this degree? And that's just, to me, I don't have an issue with that. And I'll take a future project at a future time and look at the specifics then.
And I would jump in here just to echo what Commissioner Wadi is saying, and to emphasize that we do have to make specific findings relating to the desirability and compatibility of the project and whether it will have adverse impacts. On the basis of those findings, I don't know that any of us sitting here today could say with a straight face that we think that an additional, less than 3-inch extension under these circumstances causes adverse impacts. But other projects might, right? If they were talking about a bigger encroachment, if it was right up against the neighbor's house, depending on what the design was, there's all kinds of circumstances. And if we wouldn't be able to make those findings, then, you wouldn't approve it. And I do think precedent's important. I really do, but I also think that this is an interpretation that, as far as I know, has not been presented to the commission before. And I think it's a compelling interpretation, and we shouldn't feel like we are hamstrung and can never change what has happened in the past just because the issue hasn't been raised. As with Commissioner Wadi, I would say that I am confident we have the discretion to make this kind of decision. And for this particular project, on these facts and circumstances, I'm comfortable approving that conditional use as well.
And I do I mean, I couldn't give any specific examples, but I have a feeling that we've had past applicants who have asked us to make this horizontal extension, but it's been denied in the past. Not that it's, to say that it's not that something that we've never considered. I think it has been considered and it has been rejected in the past. But I guess for me, I guess what I was getting at earlier, as my thoughts get clear, was I was thinking if, with that hypothetical, that if the applicant was to say, propose that extension that encroached a foot further, I feel like the quantifiable things we have, like adverse effects, really aren't going to apply, because I don't think there's going to be many adverse effects from having it extend 1 foot further into the setback than having it extend 2 inches more. I think what really is going to guide us are going to be sort of subjective principles, like Commissioner Waddy was talking about maintaining the historical character. And so because it's not something that we can sort of quantifiably, or at least I can't quantifiably sort of say yes or no, I'm hesitant to sort of make a judgment based on my sort of subjective opinion of that, if that makes sense.
Well, it's a couple of, let's see, ongoing comments. First of all, I think it's a really nice project. I do want to say that, and I really like the design. I guess I'd like to think this was sort of a de minimis issue, and that somewhere this is so small I don't want to even worry about it. But on the other hand, I think we'd have a rule here, and that it may allow us a use permit for one extension over an existing foundation, but I just don't interpret the rule as saying we can do the horizontal extension to the rear. We have really narrow side yards throughout Albany. It's a character of the community. And in some cases, they're hardly wide enough to get a garbage can down. It's really an issue. And I think that the zoning code was written here. This was put in the zoning code because of a desire to protect the side yards we have and to not let them be expanded and extended. And I read it to say that this applies to second-story additions, and that the zoning code acknowledges that if you have a foundation, it's not a good idea to force someone to jog in on the second floor, because it creates structural issues, and those are serious design and engineering architectural problems. But on the other hand, I think that so the commission has the right to, on second-story additions, to allow a vertical extension. We've done it many, many times. But when I don't think we should allow an enlarged building that has a second-story addition that is within the side yard setback to continue to keep the narrow setback. And so I'm again not in favor of it. Megan, I guess I should go over with you sometime. I think I understood your reading of the two sentences, and I think I understand what you're getting at, and it is really confusing. And I'm not exactly sure why that second sentence is there. But I think the way I've always read it is that we really don't have the discretion to further encroach on a required setback. And I think except vertically. And in the second-story additions, I've always interpreted it to mean that if you're gonna have the side wall go, you need to conform to the side yard setback line if you're going back on a second-story addition, and I still see it that way. So I wish I could say it were de minimis, but I think that the rule should be applied pretty literally. I don't see that we have the discretion to waiver here. Although I do admire your arguments and respect your opinions otherwise, for sure. It's a hard one, very difficult.
I just wanted to add, I want to concur with Commissioner Dollison's point about, I think the design of the project is a beautiful design, and the addition fits well, and the fact that the massing is recessed to the back to help sort of minimize the massiveness of it when you're standing from the street. And the mix of materials, I think the architect and the applicant have really sort of tried to highlight all of the aspects that we encourage in the design guidelines. And so I just wanted to make that clear that I think the project, from the design aspect, the aesthetics is quite nice.
It was fascinating. But I'm going to say, first, there's the literal interpretation, which I kind of agree with Megan on, and then there's the historic interpretation, which is interesting to hear from Doug. But and in the past, when we ran into this, I think with the underground grading issue, remember there was an interpretation about whether someone could excavate underneath
Yeah.
to get that.
Yeah.
And we let them do it because that was the way we read the law. Then we changed the law to correct that. I think
Yeah.
that needs to be corrected here. My literal read of this agrees with Megan's. And when you're concerned about the adverse effect, well, what is an adverse effect? And I think you hit on a couple. One is, can you get through there as an escape route? Can you get a garbage can down there? Can you get out in the fire? Those are kind of adverse effects. If we're not impacting that, then it does, to me, say we have that discretion here to vote on it or make a decision on it. So I would lean towards approval.
Okay.
So with that, would anyone want to make a motion?
I will move to approve planning application 18054 as presented in the staff report and not with the additional condition of approval that staff presented this evening.
Are you
Was that clear enough?
No.
Would you be willing to-
Really clear earlier.
Yes, open to a friendly amendment.
to include the retention of the picture window on the front facade?
Did you want to?
about the finish on the windows.
Sorry, you were trying to get our attention earlier.
I apologize. There was a question into the peanut gallery about what the finish on the windows was, and I nodded, but the client and the architect are proposing Marvin Integrity windows, which are not aluminum clad. They're actually a fiberglass clad, but we've worked with a historical architect in the past who strongly recommends them for their longevity. So it's not vinyl, but it's a good quality material. Did
Okay.
I adequately answer your question?
But Elizabeth, you were talking about the divided light in the front?
I had two questions. One was about the cladding material, and the other was about the operation of the window.
Okay.
And we would be willing to adjust the window to be a picture window.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
Do you want me to recap that?
Could you do that? Thank you.
So my motion is to approve the project as presented in the staff report that went out before today, with those conditions of approval, adding the condition of approval that Commissioner Waddy recommends about the picture window on the front, and not accepting the additional condition of approval that staff recommended this evening relating to a horizontal extension.
Are you recommending not to?
No, sorry. Their condition of approval
Yeah.
Was to deny?
would be to require the plans to be
Correct.
modified
Correct.
to pull that side in 2
Right.
1/4 inches or whatever. So I'm saying my motion is to ignore this recommendation.
Any seconds?
I'll second that motion.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All not in favor?
I'm going to vote aye, but I just want to make a comment that I'm approving this with the strong hope that the commission will review this code language and revise it so that so that it's clear or provides some type of scope in terms of what's an acceptable horizontal extension or not.
It's a good suggestion.
So I will approve it with that.
I'll vote no for the reasons I've stated, and
Okay.
yeah.
So the motion passes for the Any application passes. 14-day appeal period, so keep the story polls up if they're up, right? Next, yeah, that was interesting. Next on the agenda, planning application 18043, no, sorry, this we just turned around here. Yeah, that's it. Sorry. Planning application 18043, design review and parking exception for first floor and second story addition at 1110 Ordway Street.
We have to do public comment.
What?
Oh, yeah.
Just to go to the city,
yeah,
public
right.
comment.
Thank you. Public comment. Is there any comments? Let me read the whole thing.
Oh, I see.
Thank you.
On the agenda.
We didn't put it on the agenda. Oh, yeah, call to order. Right now, we're opening the floor to comments from the public. For anyone wishing to speak on something that is not on the agenda, please come forward and speak. If something is on the agenda, hold your voice until that agenda item is up. Are there any speakers? No, there are no speakers. Okay. We'll move on to agenda item, close of public comment. We'll move on to agenda item planning application 18-043. Could you introduce it, Chris?
Yes, this is, once again, design review and parking exception for first and second story addition at 1110 Ordway. Some background on the property. The subject property is a 3,500 square foot lot with a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom, 1,166 square foot home built in 1941. City records show the following work done to the property: termite and dry rot repair, electrical reservice to 100 amps. Here's the street view of the property as it sits today. This project was last seen at the June 27th, 2018 hearing. At the hearing, the commission gave feedback for project refinement to the architect to consider for a future commission review. Some possible project refinement. The commission recommended that the following project be refined and consider cross gable roof forms to match the existing home, to consider privacy concerns with the proposed balcony design / the location of the balcony, to consider projecting or recessing portions of the wall planes at either level to create architectural hierarchy, and to also consider a different type of material or texture that could help break up the massing. The commission recommended the following refinement as well. Wood windows with wood trim are more appropriate for a McGregor home. Existing lighting or exterior lighting for the entry is highly encouraged, and that the doors to the rear yard are quite large and to be refined to be more proportionate. Project requests. The applicant is seeking design review approval for a first story and second story addition. A parking exception is required to locate off-street parking in the front yard setback area. This would result in a 3-bedroom, 2.5 bathroom, 1,905 square foot home with a maximum height of 26.7. Here's an existing elevation. And here's what was previously proposed at the front elevation, which is the east side. And that's what's proposed tonight. And I'll just go through all the elevations. Here's what was previously proposed on the south side. Here's what's proposed to you now. Here's what was previously proposed on the north side. And here's what's proposed tonight before you. And then lastly, this was the rear facade previously, and this is what's proposed today. The landscape plan has been modified to take into account the commission's concerns. And project refinement. The applicant has modified roof forms to be cross gable. They've relocated the side balcony on this upper floor to be centered with the rear elevation to provide privacy to the neighbors as well as break up the rear wall massing. Inclusion of a trellis has been inputted at the rear elevation and above the door and window. And windows are proposed to be aluminum-clad wood windows with wood trim. They've reduced the height of the rear folding door to the backyard. They modified the landscape plan / entry path to the home. Arched upper front windows are proposed to match existing McGregor style. They've reduced the number of clear story windows. They've added a clear story window above the second story bedroom. Exceptional design. Projects which exceed a 0.45 FAR subject to exceptional design as reviewed by the Planning and Zoning Commission. The applicant is proposing a 54.54 FAR with the proposed additions to the home. Exceptional design treatments include matching exterior siding materials, a matching roof type and material, aluminum-clad wood windows, an outdoor balcony, and landscaping improvements. Parking exception. There's currently one off-street parking space provided in the existing attached garage. One additional off-street parking space is triggered with the proposed addition to the home. The applicant is seeking a parking exception to locate that required parking space in the front yard setback area on the driveway. This would result in 2 off-street parking spaces in total for the property. Staff has received no correspondences. Project is categorically exempt from CEQA. And recommendation, staff recommends that the Planning and Zoning Commission review and the proposed plans and provide feedback to the applicant and staff. Draft findings and conditions of approval are provided should the commission decide to take action. Thank you.
Any questions at the
Just a
staff?
clarification, so we actually don't have this for action tonight because it was noticed as a study session. So for your review this evening, it's hearing, receiving our report, hearing from the applicant, holding a public hearing, and then this will come back to you again.
Oh, okay, great. So in that case, come on up. Would you like to-
Hi, so thank you for having us again. Yeah, we're here today for, asking for the approval of the project with conditions, as you may see fit. I don't have a lot to add to what the staff just said. I mean, we worked with staff for this past months and a half. The staff did provide us a list of all the comments from the minutes of the meeting, and I believe we took them one by one and worked on them. We sent staff a proposed plan. Staff had further comments, basically pointing at us like maybe we interpreted one of the commissioner's comments not the way that we should have, and we went back and modified it and came up with this last design here. So as staff pointed earlier, we actually took every single one of the comments that were listed and addressed them, or tried to address them in a combined and make a design that still makes sense. And I think we have actually achieved that. Taking the building that we had before, changing the windows, having less types of windows, changing the roof as the commissioner asked, working with the privacy, and we used that comment of the balcony that was on the side to put it in the back so we could recess the building, giving exactly the same amount of square footage, but dealing with the massing of the back by being recessed, and the privacy on the side, putting clear story window on the side. We reduced the door. We put a trellis. So at the end of the day, we're basically getting to where you wanted us to be last time we spoke. Obviously, when we get comments from 5 different perspectives, some maybe don't work together, but I think with the help of staff, we actually did make something that takes all of those comments. It's hard to make the perfect project that will suit everybody, obviously. I think ours actually has a lot of similarities with the previous project. The massing is very similar. The treatment is somewhat a little bit different, but the massing and the floor plan, they're very, very similar. So I could relate to you already approving a project that is extremely similar, and yet with very different type of finishes on the McGregor house, where we actually, on the contrary, are following your comments of trying to keep and retain most of those comments. So I feel confident that in that regard, the commission would actually approve our project with maybe some conditions of approval and not send us back. We did actually follow one of the big comments that you had was to, from the perspective of the backyard, to push the building back, so not over the first floor. And I know some design, when they're more modern, it's more acceptable to do that, like the previous project. But we think we agree with the commission to push it back on ours and lose a few square footage. It does break the massing. In that regard, and in all fairness, I think that we've worked a lot with the commission's comments, the commission's ability to actually see one project and another one and judge them similarly, I would say. In that regards, I think we did a pretty good job. I mean, that house is going to look a whole lot better than it does right now. It's retaining a lot of its characteristic. We've brought back the language that that house had. You pointed it out. I mean, I'm an architect, but I don't claim to know everything. I couldn't. And you pointed it out, and then we worked with the client and the owners to actually bring back those things that we had missed. And I think we've done it in a way that's reasonable. Basically, by just simplifying the language of the house. Sorry. And in that regard, I think the project is ready. I mean, I don't really have much to add. Really, I wanted to point out that we did basically take into account every single comment that you had. And there were, I would say, maybe 80% of them were consistent. 20% might have pulled the project in a different direction, which is fair, 5 personalities. We worked that out, and staff, which has more experience in those things, pointed out that, well, maybe this one you want to bring it back this way a little bit, and you'll be more in phase with what everybody wants at the end of the day. And I think that's what we produce. I mean, like it or not, it is getting there, and I think it'll be a great addition to the community. And again, I see so many similarities with the previous project that I would be, raising question as why one would be approved and not another one, but then I would really, as a professional, would want to know why at this point. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
If you have any questions.
Yeah, does anyone have any questions?
I did have just one quick question. The staff report that you guys just presented, you were noting that the windows proposed are aluminum clad. The plans, though, note Milgard aluminum windows, which are not clad
Yeah.
wood windows. Those are very different window types.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering which one it actually is.
I would defer to the architect and just verify which one is presented or proposed.
I forgot which one actually
The
you talk about.
agenda that
I
had the
honestly don't
attachment
remember.
for the window
Yeah,
detail
no, I agree with you, yeah.
Milgard.
is Milgard
That
aluminum.
might have been from the previous one, and we
Yeah.
didn't get
Yeah.
a new refined spec sheet for the
Yeah.
what windows were proposed, yeah.
Yeah, I noticed the same
So sorry,
thing.
I'm confused. So what's being proposed right now?
Well, right now I think we have the Milgard's aluminum window, which are actually quite nice.
That's the current proposal, is the Milgard aluminum.
I believe so, yeah. You're catching me a bit off guard. I need to check the drawings myself.
Yeah.
But I'm assuming that's what it is. I honestly don't remember right now. But then again, for the windows, we'll go with what the commission thinks deemed for the project as a condition of approval. We're totally fine with that. And we know that when we go back and forth, there's always something that, a junior staff person puts a typo, puts the wrong information on the plan, and there's really no hard, not trying to cheat right here, and I really just don't remember which one we put, to be honest. But I know it's the Milgard's aluminum.
So it's aluminum,
Yeah.
single hung, it's the detail up on the screen.
That's
There you
where
go.
I saw it. It was in that attachment.
Yeah.
I guess my other
there you go. And
question
we have
on
the
that is
spec
that
right
the
here.
elevations don't actually have any single or double hung windows proposed. They're all
No.
casements or arched windows, but the window detail had a bunch of single hung.
This is a Milgard standard detail. That's the only reason.
Right, but I mean, the detail for a casement is different than a detail for a single hung window in terms of how the proportions are relative
True,
to the reveal.
true.
And all that.
And this is, at the end of the day, it's going to be a Milgard detail, and that's the Milgard detail that they have for that series, and we could not find the other one that actually matched the windows we're actually going to put. But the idea is that they're still going to be recessed the same way. Of course, the window themselves have a different detail, and the aluminum is bent and formed differently, but they're recessed the same way from the building. That's really what we're pointing at right here by pointing at this series. And yeah, I mean, they just did not have it, to be honest. I could not find it on the spec
Thanks.
without getting to the vendor, and he did not want to commit at this point, unfortunately.
Thank you. Any questions of staff or applicant?
I had a question for staff. I'm just curious why it was noticed as a second study session instead of for action. Is it just because there was so much feedback the first time?
Exactly. There was considerable feedback when you reviewed this in June, and I think the architect has made some efforts to address those concerns, but we wanted to make sure that the second time around he was on the right track with the commission.
And we did appreciate the help. Again, we were in close communication with Chris, and I know he was on vacation at the same time, but we did go back and forth, and he actually looked at more than one of our design, a complete one, and then some more little changes, and then I think it was actually pretty positive. We made a lot of progress.
Is it okay for me? I really appreciate what you've done. I think there's clear evidence that you did listen to what we were saying, and you worked hard to make some significant changes in the design, and I think it's greatly improved.
Thank you.
I guess I still have some questions to ask, and I guess the most significant one I have is I'm wondering about the ceiling heights in the rear in particular. One of them is like 12 feet on that ground floor room, and above that is 8 feet 9, I think it is. It's both are no, it's even higher. Both are very high. 9.6, 12.3 and 9.6. I think
Yes.
my notes indicated in that rear. I went out from the elevation to me looks somewhat out of proportion, and that's the reason. It's because the back of it is so high. In the field, when I looked out, went to the site, and looked around, looked at from across the street and all of that, this lot slopes down a little bit, so I guess I'm not too as concerned about the height of the addition. But I'm still wondering about why do you want to have 12-foot 6 ceilings and 9-foot, or 12-foot 3 and 9-foot 6 ceilings?
I don't,
And can you bring it down some?
I don't have a great answer for that as a matter of preference.
Uh-huh.
New owners have that preference, and that's, I don't have a justification for this. We do a lot of houses with 12-foot ceiling, 10-foot ceiling, and so on. What we're trying to do is that from the exterior, that it doesn't feel that big, and we are stepping down, so the overall height of the building, let's say, if we were not stepping down, and, this section is right here, we would have the exact same height building, on, which we usually have on this project, where we, thank you very much, when we take the plate, and we take it right here.
Right,
And then we get a few step down.
yeah,
But the grade being still here, we're still building this. From the outside, it looks just the
Right.
same. It's much as high, so we're just using what we have, and we're trying to get a better
sure.
inside. And the exterior,
Right.
it would not feel any bigger than any house, which would have, if I remove 8, that would be 8, and a 9 would have 9 and 9, would be pretty reasonable. And the house would be just as tall. It would look pretty much just the same from the exterior. We decided to go down and to actually give it to the
Yeah.
homeowner, and that's.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be a personal preference, somebody that wants to look inside of them for that, and it's still giving to the exterior world
Yeah.
the feel and look of a house that is not that by not extending it.
That's right. No, I
essentially.
understand that. I understand going down. I think that's a good move, actually.
It helps,
I
no?
like that. But if you didn't have as much height on those 2 rear floors, you might be able to cut out 3 or 4 stairs going up, and the whole thing could come down.
True.
And it might it might look better in the front elevation where you have the little cupola there. You have the two roofs that are over your staircase there.
True, but
You might be able to reduce that by quite a bit by knocking out 3 or 4 stairs, and I don't know.
I mean,
It would come down. And again, when I was out at the site and looked at it, are your story poles accurate, do you think, height-wise?
I mean, I'm assuming, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
assuming that, I mean, if they're done, they have to be done properly.
I think I'll grant you that. I'll assume that they probably are. So,
Again, I mean, I understand what you're saying, but if we just extended the plate and had 2 regular ceilings, we would not have this conversation, because you would not tell me, well, why don't you bring it down to 7 feet? That's the minimum the code allows to drop the house down.
no, I wouldn't do that.
No, of course not, you wouldn't do that, then nobody
And
would do
I
that.
don't mind having above a room that's over 8 feet or a vaulted ceilings. I like the extra space. I like that.
I
But
agree that, but really my point is we're using space that would, in any way, would have contributed to the overall height of the building, so we're not taking anything out of the community
Yeah.
by just having the envelope we would have had in the first place. We just dug down a little bit to give it more facility.
yeah, okay, all right. I had a couple other little questions I had then. In the second floor, you have a closet there off the bathroom. I had 2 concerns about that on the floor plan. One, you have a window going into a closet. I'm wondering if that's a good idea.
Well,
And then the other thing is that the door to that closet is through the bathroom. And I thought, why do you want to do that?
again, that's.
Maybe the closet should have access directly from the bedroom.
No, I mean, sure.
Okay,
I don't know what to tell you about this, to be honest. There is really a question of preference,
okay,
of the way people want to function in their own house.
sure.
We have a lot of cultures in the Bay. I'm from a different culture. My client is from a different culture. There's a few different cultures here too.
Sure.
And everybody's got a very different interpretation of how they live in their house and what having a private space means. And putting on pressure on it to ask a question as why your door is there in the interior of the house when it has no impact in the exterior is interesting. I can give you an answer.
Yeah.
I don't want to extend too much because this is a preference of the client. And I don't want to debate this as it doesn't impact the exterior, but I will spend more time on the windows to the exterior. The windows are here because we have a window to balance that side of the building,
Okay.
we want to put 2 windows up so we don't have a big blank wall.
Okay.
And then where do we want to put where do we want to put those windows? Well, on the corners, because it's not a very big addition, it will make it look a bit nicer. So we have one on the shower side, and then we mirror the other one on the other corner in the closet. It's going to be a small window. It doesn't have much of a purpose, but to look better from the outside. It's an effort of the client to make a more appealing building for its neighbors. By that, they know they're going to lose a tiny bit of privacy, or actually probably not, just they're going to have a little bit of light. We'll reorganize the shelving there a little bit differently so we don't have a blank window.
Yeah.
But besides that, it's really an effort, again, to work with the commission as to make the building more appealing from the exterior, and not necessarily only serving the people that are going to use it. They recognize that they have to make an effort when they walk into a community, that they you know, you're here next. I mean, there's somebody there before you, and you try to make an effort to not impose too much of yourself. But they also feel, or I feel as their architect, that there is also the interior of the house really belongs to them, and there's some aspect of it that as long as they don't really impose more by getting it, I think they should be left alone.
Okay. Yeah, I grant you, it's not any of my business, design review-wise, where the closet
Yeah,
door
it's
is.
just a preference.
I totally agree with you on that, and
Yeah.
it just seemed a little unique to me.
It's not my preference.
And so but the closet window, I still think is a design question on the outside, and you know.
Yeah, it is a response to...
I don't think they function well, and.
I don't personally really
Yeah.
like it. It's
I
a
cut it
response
out.
to the commission saying, well, make your building more appealing from the exterior, put some windows, but put small windows so you don't get views on your neighbor. And the only way to do this is do small windows, and then that's, well, there's a place where to put it. I don't honestly have a preference. I don't typically put windows in closets. I don't think they're very useful. But if there was something the commission felt would help the project because it balances the project from the exterior and makes it more appealing to the neighbor, then we're totally all for it. It's just a closet, after all. We don't care so much about it. It's just for the exterior. If we feel that we don't need it, we're happy to remove it, as much as we're happy to keep it. Again, it's just a closet. Nobody in the household cares about it.
Yeah.
I mean, nobody feels strongly about it. You know, it's there because we thought
Yeah.
the neighbor would like it better.
Yeah.
And it doesn't...
I think-
other than, you know,
I
We
think
have
your
a,
neighbor on the south side has a totally blank wall where this would be. I mean,
There is-
and they have no windows, and they have an addition there with no windows at all, as I recall.
Yeah.
So, anyway,
But again, you know, that's one thing that we had comments that went back and forth, giving us, you know, pulling the blanket into direction. One comment was,
Yeah.
well, you want to make a building that doesn't look flat
Yeah.
and blank, so you need to do something to it, and put windows to do something to it. And then, well, you can't put windows because you're creating views.
but I will say,
You know, there's
we
a
have a
place where we need to-
1928 house with
Yeah.
a window in the closet.
Yeah.
And it's not a good idea because
No.
if your clothes fade, it's a constant sun hitting
Yeah,
clothes. So
and probably going to put some blinds, but
always a-
it's,
anyway, yeah.
yeah.
anyway, those are my comments right now. I had the windows, oh yeah, Elizabeth brought that up, so, okay.
I also have
Other comments?
one quick question, just to make sure I'm reading the plans here correctly. So on the revised floor plans, they're just a little challenging to review because it feels like the ground floor is actually two different split levels where you have the new living room. Is the new living room space, the one with the 12-foot volume, not on the same plane as the existing sidewall? Is it actually coming closer to the side setback?
No, it's
It's not?
completely aligned. It
So-
is completely aligned.
Okay, because on the proposed east elevation, when you look at the existing sidewall,
I mean,
maybe, Chris, could you guys pull up I think it's A5? Yeah, A5, when you're looking at the proposed east elevation.
One moment, please.
Sure. no problem. Yeah. right there. To the front, yeah, scroll up a little bit more.
yes.
There you go. So the existing sidewall on the right-hand side, it's obviously to the left of where the chimney is as sort of a reference point. When you look at the expansion, you can see it pops out a little to the right of the chimney,
Yeah,
which to me is saying it's not in the same plane as the existing sidewall.
that's what you
It's
mean.
actually doing sort of a horizontal side addition, if you will. When you're going back to the rear, you're also coming out to the side.
Yes, you're right. Yeah, no, I understand what you mean now. Yes, yes, it is popping out a little bit. And let me look at the site plan too.
Which is also, I think
Yeah.
that clarifies it when you look on
Yeah.
the side elevation,
Yeah.
the roof line is broken and you
Oh, yeah.
have that solid massing and that is forward
Yes.
in that elevation then.
And one of the reasons we did this is, we try to meet the setback requirements, and I think we did. And by pushing the house like this, we have the same width of a house, and we shifted it a little bit in order to actually follow the design guidelines of the city, which you cannot encroach in the setback. And I think we did it, like, we do it a lot of times in this type of configuration, because again, we have a very limited amount of space. And the truth is, to increase in that type of location, it's actually pretty challenging. I mean, that's why there is those commissions, because we don't want any nonsense to be done there. But part of it is to respect the setbacks and work with them, which we have to come here in the first
Sure,
place.
I wasn't actually looking for like an explanation, I was
No,
just
sure.
trying to get some clarity on what
Yeah.
the
No,
proposal
no,
is.
it does, and at first I said no because I thought you were talking about something else, but yes, yeah.
Thanks.
About 1.5 feet, if I remember right, maybe 2. I would have to check on the plans.
Yeah, it's all common discussion. It's informal because it's just comments review. Go
I
ahead.
guess I'll make some comments, and I'm making comments, and I don't want any response.
Sure,
Just
fair enough.
my comments, which is how we normally do the discussion period. I think the design is a nice improvement over the last presentation that was given to us for the project. I'm not too concerned about the ceiling height that Commissioner Donaldson referenced earlier. I do agree, though. I think that it could be an opportunity to sort of reduce the overall height of the massing, but I wouldn't, if it's kept as is, that wouldn't solely prevent me from approving the project. I do think the window in the closet, I would be fine approving the project if you remove that window. And that, I don't think it affects the sort of aesthetic character of it too much if it's not there and it's not a sort of symmetrical elevation in terms of the window placements for that. So I'd be fine removing that. Excuse me, and yeah, I mean, I'll let the architect and the client decide the sort of floor plan. I have seen the sort of closet entrance from the bathroom. It is a little atypical, but I have seen it before in my professional experience. But otherwise, I think the applicant has done a good job of trying to address our comments and concerns from the previous presentation. And I feel like the windows definitely have a much more unified character to them than the previous presentation. And the only other thing I would note is, I think if there is an opportunity for us to have a impact on the actual windows that are chosen, I mean, I guess I would, I think this is where Commissioner White was going towards, was that my preference would be for a wood-clad, aluminum-clad wood window,
Yeah.
rather than a pure aluminum window.
Yeah.
And I guess those are my only real comments for it.
I don't have much to add. I'll just echo that I think this is a big improvement and appreciate your work paying attention to the initial comments, especially on the front elevation. I think the window language makes a lot more sense now. And I think that moving the balcony from the side to the back is going to be a better layout. So I'll defer to my fellow commissioners on some of the more design-related comments, but yeah, I think it's definitely moved in the right direction.
Sure. I just had a couple additional, I agree. I do think we're going in the right direction, so I appreciate your efforts. And a couple comments on the massing. I would still like to see a little more massing reduction on that front stair, sort of pop out, that sort of like nose-like feature at the front. That piece still really feels quite awkward and not quite jiving with the architecture of the existing building a bit. I understand the intent, I understand why it's there, but there's a lot of excess volume in there that's not necessary to purely access the new master suite that's up there, and I think that could be dramatically reduced in overall size and volume. I also feel like something was a little off for me, and I think that side addition of it extending further than where the existing sidewall is would make a big difference in the overall feel and sort of width of that addition. And so I would like to see if you guys could explore sort of, and again, this is some of the similar type of comments I made to the previous application. To me, there is something about the existing width of the homes that we have in Albany and respecting that, the way those homes are built. And so when adding on an addition, both vertically and horizontally, to kind of respect those two sidewall planes and look at doing that. And then the only other comment that I have is really on the windows, surprise, surprise. Three primary comments, again, echoing what I said with the previous application that was here. I do really feel like the existing picture window is a character-defining feature of the home and should be retained. The proposal to change it to a double casement I don't think is architecturally appropriate. I think it should be retained with that really nice thick recess on that picture window that's there right now, to retain that, the type of trim that's on that, which is really minimal, and to really retain that as a picture window that has those very unique mutton designs. And then similarly, the double casement that's more square over the garage. I think that size, proportion, and again, trim detail should be retained. The way there's, and I agree that I think the aluminum clad windows I think are more appropriate on this type of home rather than the strict aluminum shown on A5, which feels like a very sort of thick application of trim around the windows, feels very tacked on and not architecturally appropriate for the McGregor style home. So I would ask that the type of window trim that's used on McGregor's typically, which is just that little thin reveal on the stucco, is what's emulated for the new addition and retained for the existing. But again, I do think sort of those are just the fine-tuning details. I do think the project otherwise is really close to being there.
The only other easy comment I'm going to make is when you resubmit, that if you can just add some kind of note that calls out the materiality of the railing for that back balcony, just so we have it on record.
You said when we resubmit, can the commission consider an approval with conditions? I mean, we're very close. We're talking about trims and details, and the delay to resubmit is quite taking time. I mean, there's also a reality of people that would want to move forward if it's possible.
I don't think
It hasn't been noticed, right?
It was notified as a study session, so we'd have to renotice it for action.
We're locked into it.
unfortunately we can't.
So you can't. I hear you. Yeah,
Is it possible that when it comes back to us for approval, it could be on consent?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah.
do you
Which means-
understand what that means? That's basically where staff would present it as an approval that would be acted on without discussion from us.
I hear you.
Unless there is something in the proposal that someone wants to discuss.
That would get you in and out of here in about 5 minutes.
Right.
And then, so in that regards, we would love to do that. And then could we agree on the things that need to be modified? I mean, again, we had some comments. And some pull the project in different directions, again, like trying to match the walls of the existing walls for the addition. We can't do that in the first place because we're in the setback. And we just heard that's not something the city does.
But what I was suggesting is that
On the
you
other
pull
side.
it less.
I was getting there.
Okay.
Yeah.
But we're reducing from one side and we're taking it back from the other side. And it's just a very common way to do things. And I personally don't have a negative or positive idea, but I think it's nice. I think it breaks the massing furthermore, to be honest. It's not small enough and it's not too big. It's 1.5 feet or 2 feet. That does contribute to express more volume in the building, which is really nice when you walk around. I know sometimes drawings look really busy, and then it's hard to interpret what they're going to feel like when we see them in perspective. But anyway, if the commission is fine, I've taken a couple of notes. I want to repeat them, and if that's
I have a few comments to make.
Oh, sure.
I also want to echo, I think I really liked the way you put the balcony in the back. I think that was excellent. They have a nice view now. Also, you can look down into your own yard and look at your own kids playing rather than the neighbor's kids. So most of the changes I'm agreeing with, but I think the landscape plan has really lagged. In fact, I don't see a landscape plan. I saw the plan, but it's not really a plan. You got 4 species on there, and
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
there's 4 species, 4 plant species, and I think they're just kind of scattered around. if, I'm not expecting a full-blown landscape plan, but this I knew wasn't really thought through. You just throwing plants out there and throwing symbols on there, and you have 8 irrigation zones, you only need 3. So it's kind of just putting stuff on the page to satisfy, and that's the way I felt when I read it. So I was a little irritated by that. But if you don't, if you could maybe perhaps write up a little paragraph or just a few sentences on what your vision for the landscape is, it would help me, because I think some of the plants there some of it could be good, but it's not shown in plan, all right? There's some elements that, I kind of like the berries and the native,
And you're right about that. I mean, we didn't really think through of the whole plant, because we know that's going to, whatever we put here, it's going to change in the future. Some plants will die right away, some plants will do good, and we know it's going to evolve pretty quickly.
Oh, I hope not. I mean, when you're putting irrigation in, I mean, if the intention is to put stuff there, it's going to live. But you're right, you have a lot of perennials there. You have a lot of perennials, and then,
And what we did express in this plan is actually the hardscape versus the landscape, and that's really what we want. That's what we feel strong about. The plants themselves, honestly, even in Lafayette, they make us sometimes do a deed restriction about how to keep the plants, but the plant wants to die there because it doesn't have what it wants. That's just what happens, and grandma shows up and puts a new plant.
I understand
But I
the
get your
landscape
point.
is a living
We'll do better.
environment, and I
Yeah.
like what you did with the hardscape. I
Yeah.
think could improve it. But
Because this will
I
stay.
guess if it's the landscape plan, I want to see, I just don't want
I
to
hear
be
you.
a place saver, it's kind of irritating. So that's all.
I understand, yeah, yeah.
Saying that, you maybe want to repeat the comments, so we're.
Yes, so I have what I gathered is this, and please correct me, so working on the trims, getting the McGregor design for the trims, smaller, and not exactly what we have now, and providing a detail for that. Removing the window in the walk-in closet, everybody agrees that it's probably not necessary. Clarify the material for the balcony. We're thinking metal, something simple. It'll look pretty nice. And I had another note about the picture window in the front, to not make it a casement, but make it a picture window.
It was both the windows.
Oh, both. Got it. So both. And that's all the notes I have so far, so I'm probably missing
And then the
something.
window material throughout to make aluminum clad for
Got it.
all of the new windows in the
Right, right.
addition.
Aluminum wood-clad windows throughout.
And
I don't know if there was consensus, if other people had the same thought about the stair extension, sort of the volume of that.
no, I did.
I do.
Yeah.
I completely concur with your comment on that. And it may be a lot to ask, I think, but I concur with your comment. And it's related to my comment about possibly reducing the interior ceiling heights. And maybe, you're able to cut out a couple or 3 or 4 steps going up and
I understand, but
reduce the length of that run and
unfortunately, it would not reduce the volume by anything significant, because you have to make it a little bit bigger to make it a nice space. And we can look on the section, if you don't mind, bring us back to the section. And it won't make a big impact, and I would really appreciate if the commission could let us have this. It's a big part of the project. I personally think it's going to look really great. That's a difference of point of view, but I respect yours. But I think it actually works pretty well. And it's not practical, because at the end of the day, this volume is lined up to this plate. And if we reduce the whole thing, it doesn't change it. I can cut some steps here, but that goes down.
But there's the other portion that doesn't have the window in it, the lower portion to the left, right
No,
there.
but I'm talking about all of this, we have a dimension here, which is very, very close to the minimum the code would allow you to have upstairs, which is a 6'8" clearance, and it's a 7'1" clearance, meaning we cannot really bring this down unless we can here, or we'd actually go push it further around. This is
So you could bring the portion to the right down, and you could bring the portion to the left down. At that specific spot where it's 7'1", you may not be able to drop that, but on either the right and the left, you could certainly bring both of those
I would
down.
point out that's actually going to do the opposite of what we're talking about. And let me show you why. Because by reducing this, I need to push it this way, and that's going to extend this. This is the smallest I can make it happen, by pushing it this way as far as I can. If we go the other direction, it will look bigger. There is some misconception about things, but it would actually do the opposite of what you want.
I guess the comment that I was having on that is I see that entire feature as unnecessary and not a value add to the design.
I understood that, yeah.
And being that it's a FAR of what, 5.45, right at the limit, I
Pretty
think
close, yeah.
a little more advanced landscape plan.
I
You
will.
don't need to put irrigation there because the irrigation was not real anyway, so just look in the plants.
I hear
Thanks.
you, but
Appreciate it.
we'll probably stick to the hardscape landscape ratio because I think that actually works well, and we put it sometimes, but
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah, for the plants, yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
So that was a good recap.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, it seems like that kind of captures all of the
Okay.
comments.
Yeah, I know this is grueling for you, but it's
No,
working.
it's fine. So if the commission is okay, I'd like to say that the bulk of the building stays the way it is, and we make the adjustment, the 5 or 6 adjustment we talked about, and then it could go to, I forgot the way you named the next session,
Okay.
and of course, the landscape plan in it.
Yeah.
Meaning, for that next section, do we have to be here or no at that point? If staff said it's okay,
It
just-
might
You'll
get
need to be
pulled,
here.
it might get pulled off, so you should be here just in case, yeah.
yeah. But as long as, we're going to work with staff and make sure we've captured those comments properly, and as long as they tell us, yes, I think we've got it, we should expect that it's fine.
Okay, thank
I
you.
mean, that's a question.
Okay.
Yeah, I would recommend, highly recommend though that you come,
Yeah,
because
of course.
even if we
Yeah.
like it, somebody from the public could ask to
Yeah,
pull it.
no,
and
I hear you.
Yeah.
so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So on to new business, which there is none. Then announcements and communication.
Just a quick little note. We've mentioned the Solano Complete Streets Plan, and we had our pop-up event at Flower Lane. I think I saw Commissioner Waddy driving, and I was the traffic control person, so thank you for
Driving something.
yielding. Yeah. We were out there all day on Saturday. We did a little demonstration to show ball bats and traffic calming at the intersection of Pomona and Solano. These are the photos that are up on the Solano Complete Streets website.
Okay,
So this gives you another perspective. We had straw bale and cones, and Flowerland graciously loaned us some plants and furniture to put out there to kind of further illustrate how we can activate the space and green it up. It was a really fun event. We had a lot of foot traffic. I don't know from the consultant what the final count was, but I think within the first hour, they had close to 100 people. As we were setting up, we started at about 11:30, and we just had people coming, "What are you doing? How can I get involved?" And
Right.
everyone was generally quite supportive and positive about what we were doing, so.
Was those crosswalks painted too, or those already?
That is a form of duct tape. It's that thermoplastic tape, and that was probably by the time I saw you, we were controlling traffic and quickly putting tape down and then quickly letting cars go through.
oh, really?
So it
Okay,
took close
wow.
to an hour to set up. But yeah, you can see
Look at the
here.
plants in there too, wow.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah, it
cool.
reduced the, definitely calmed traffic down during the setup. There was some fairly aggressive driving by the time we got there, and then once we had everything set up, people really like stopped, paid
Yeah.
attention. They were more aware of pedestrians in the crosswalk. So we will be coming back to you with the consultant to give you an overview of the project and where we are so far in the process, and get your feedback as part of that.
Good, yeah, cool.
Can I just bring up something briefly? And I apologize to all the commissioners. I know we want to go home, and I hate to be a dead horse. I'm just thinking back to the one where we talked about the code language, and I think the applicant, whether it was intentional or unintentional, did themselves a big favor by not including Part B of 19. But as I look at A and B, once I read both, it clearly, the reason for that second sentence that we thought was redundant was because it's poorly worded, was to qualify it that A is to apply for side yard setbacks. And then if you look at the language, B clearly is to apply to front yard setbacks specifically.
Yeah.
And so that's why we have an A and a B, and that's why that second sentence is in there, is to qualify it that what they're talking about is applying to the side yards specifically.
Which
And
is
so
what
it's-
we were talking about.
yeah, and so I guess just to the whole comment about how that second sentence was kind of redundant, what's its point? I think its point was to qualify that A is talking about the side yard setbacks only and specifically. Because because in.
I think
But
I
it
need
heard
to
his
read,
place, though.
and I appreciate you actually doing the work to read. the rest of
Look,
it. Yeah.
Not that it changes anything, I just,
Yeah.
we were kind of wondering why that sentence was there, but it just specifically says, existing walls which do not conform to the existing side or rear yard setbacks may be extended. And then if you look at B, it says existing, extension of existing walls which do not conform to the existing front yard setback.
Yeah.
And so that's why there's a distinction, and that second sentence is in there. It's just to qualify it, that it applies to the side and rear yard setbacks.
I'm not like following what you're saying, but that's okay.
No, me too. He's got it here, I'll look it up later. Okay,
Just one other thing to note, I contacted all of you regarding attendance in October, and we have determined we will not have a quorum for October 10th.
Oh,
So
no
we'll
quorum?
cancel that meeting and just have our next regular meeting on October 24th.
No
oh, I
quorum.
thought it was the 24th date, you weren't worried about the quorum. Was it 10th you were?
It's the 10th, yeah.
I'm here on the 24th. I'll be gone on the 10th.
Doug will be out, Eric will be out, and I think Liz is on vacation.
Oh, okay.
The 24th is it's a
Okay.
marathon week for me. I was hoping that was the one, but no, I'll be,
It's my husband's birthday.
okay. Well,
Okay,
that-
so you'll have to cancel a meeting, huh? Yeah, yeah.
It looks like October 10th is canceled.
October 10th will be canceled. We'll be putting that notification up on the city's website, and you'll be getting postcards from us for the 24th.
Okay, thank you. That's closes the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.